Hello and welcome back to Brian Reeby Drives Electric, and today we've got a beautiful sunny day. It's fantastic. Spring is finally starting to show up here in Minnesota, and as spring is coming, so are more EV events. There's one or two every weekend now, and I try to hit as many as I can. But over the last couple weeks we had Earth Day, and I did another event that I wanted to talk about and share some of the ride and drive portions of that as well. But we'll kick it off with our Earth Day events that unfortunately weren't as nice weather-wise as this. I went down with a couple other EV owners down to Northfield, Minnesota. We had an afternoon event there that was rainy and windy, but we had a lot of good conversations. Unfortunately, they only had 4 spots for EVs, so there wasn't a ton of variety. We had 2 Tesla Model 3s, my Model Y, and a Chevy Bolt. But we did have lots of good conversations, and people varying from just learning about EVs for the first time, kind of skeptical, checking them out, kicking the tires, that sort of thing, and seeing how much space was in them, to people who already had ordered, or people who knew people who had them, and an EV was going to be their next purchase as well. A good variety of interest levels and education levels, so a nice afternoon there despite the weather. Of course, we got the cars all cleaned up and shiny, and then we had kind of dusty rain for a little bit that got everything spotty, but it was all right. It was still fun. By the end of the event, the kids had found beach buggy racing, and so my car was kind of relegated to the racing car for all the kids cycling through. So that was kind of fun, you know, kind of showing that there's more to this than just driving and charging. You know, they're fun too, and actual real spacious usable vehicles. So great experience there despite the weather, and you know, the turnout wasn't quite what we had hoped with that lousy weather. But after that, I drove about 40 minutes east to Red Wing and joined some other EV owners there at the high school. There we had a Model 3, my Model Y, a Chevy Bolt, and a Ford plug-in hybrid. At the high school, they were hosting some presentations and I think some videos about different climate topics, Earth Day things, and we were just kind of there as people were cycling in to the auditoriums, that they could stop and check out the cars, sit in them, see if one would be right for them. I heard from a few different people of, we want them to sit in it because we want this to be their next car. So again, you know, showing off the space, showing off the area in the trunk and everything. Some older people were seeing which one, as far as getting into it and getting out of it, with different medical conditions, you know, which one is easiest, which one fits their lifestyle and their needs best. So kind of those important things people need to see without the pressure of sales being on them. Now the weather did clear up a little bit for that event, so that was nice. I didn't get a lot of footage there, but we did have a nice, relatively sunny evening there. On the drive home, I did get hammered with some major storms. Luckily no hail though, and made it through pretty easily. But now I want to talk about a few weeks before that, where in Mankato, Minnesota, Ellie and I did a ride and drive event with the Model Y. I was having some eye issues at the time, and so Ellie was doing most of the ride and drives. I would ride along when there was enough room and chime in, but mostly I let her take those. But it was a great event because there was a real variety of EV vehicles there. We had obviously the Tesla Model 3, a Tesla Model X, a Model S Plaid, Model S Long Range, and my Model Y. But we also had the ID4, we had the Jaguar I-Pace, I believe there's a Chevy Bolt in the mix, and maybe one other I'm forgetting. You'll see it on screen. But a good variety, so people got to have multiple test drive experiences. And I think there was some donation for every test drive. A certain amount was donated to a charity, which is always a great thing to throw in with the ride and drive events. And this one was sponsored by Recharge Minnesota, so they did all the organizing, got everybody signed up, made sure they had insurance information and licenses for all of the drivers. So that was nice to have that all taken care of. So here again, a lot of good conversations and things that come up while driving, which is kind of an important factor, you know, that butts and seats thing, that getting people from realizing that these aren't just toys, they're real vehicles that people live with every day. And so the conversations would start before we got in the car. We'd kind of walk around, talk about storage space, answer the big questions. And I had done this event in 2019, and that was really good, very busy event. but it was also very challenging because the route was all through city streets, and there's only so much, driving, so much testing you can do on city streets. This year they had a new route that kind of took us out of town a little bit and then through some winding areas, but it gave people a chance to get a sense of the acceleration and handling on some curves. Even though we weren't going too fast, it was still a lot better than what we had done in 2019. So I'll take you along on that drive and an abridged version and show you kind of the highlights and talk through some of the things we talked about while people were driving. And if you're interested in doing ride and drives with your EV, this can be kind of a guide or kind of things to think about as you're talking with drivers. And if you can think of other good topics to bring up or things I may have missed, feel free to add those down in the comments below so other people can share with your experience. So we'll wrap it up with that test drive in just a second, but I wanted to say if you're interested in EVs, if you own an EV, if you're skeptical of EVs, look for some of these events around your area and just kick the tires, see the space, talk to the drivers about the positives and the negatives. Not everything's perfect. Not every vehicle is going to fit everyone's lifestyle. But these events where there's no pressure of sales or anything like that are a great chance for you to look at the future of mobility. So I encourage everyone to find events like this around you. And now to me in the car, and we'll do that test drive loop. This is the path for our test drive. We came out from the Maverick Dome here at the Minnesota State University Mankato. Can never quite get that right. They changed names from what it used to be when I was a kid. But we had people come out of the parking lot there onto this semi-residential street. It's got some stoplights and things, but it's a 40 mile an hour, pretty easy road. And at this stage of the game, generally we're answering questions about the vehicle or helping them get familiar with where they need to look for the speed limit, things like that. And then we're kind of coming to the edge of town here, and we would let them know that, hey, when you get to this point, when you get out of town, the speed limit picks up. Feel free to let it loose a little bit, put your foot down, and experience the acceleration. And so I'm doing it here, and we would tell them to do that, but a lot of people are kind of hesitant to really put it down in someone else's car, which wasn't the case in 2019. In 2019 we had a more inner city route, but it seemed like people were more willing to gun it, which is weird on the city streets. But just a few blocks down and we're already out into farmland, which again is a nice place if people wanted to do some accelerating. And this is a good opportunity to talk about regenerative braking. That when you let your foot off the accelerator, it's going to slow, and we've got one pedal driving on, so it will slow all the way to a stop if we let it, and that saves on brakes. Nobody's going, so I'm going to. And this is another place where you can really mash the accelerator, get up to get a good feel for that fun acceleration level. And with a car coming, it was a good way to make sure we were out of their way and not interrupting their drive. And before long here, we're getting off the highway. And if people were just focusing on driving, I'd just kind of, or Ellie would just kind of talk about some road trips, how you find places to charge, using the navigation in the car, and just kind of giving them the ownership experiences. Some places where maybe there isn't a lot of charging, talk about that, or answer any questions about, levels. There's lots of level 2 charging here in Mankato, so answering questions about that, where future chargers will be, the expansion of the CCS network. The Superchargers network is pretty robust, but the closest one here in Mankato is St. Peter. But obviously you'd be charging at home if you had a garage and could charge here. And as we come back into town and have to slow down a little bit, we come to a hillside here where we're gonna wind some corners a little bit. Now, when we were doing this test drive, we had to be a little careful here because there were quite a few deer. I know at least 3 trips that I was on, there were deer kind of coming out or crossing in this ravine area. And so as much fun as it is to really throw it into the curves, you also have to be a little bit careful being on the edge of town here. Back into more residential, a few more curves going down the hill again. Again, being able to talk about regen braking. So I thought this was a much better test route than the one they had in 2019, which was more in town. But this gives you a little bit of flavor of some hills, some curves, some highway, some in town, and it's a pretty slick route. And it would have been nice to film some reactions of drivers as they did this, but I'm not sure how the organizers would have liked that, and you're also putting people on the spot when they're trying to be there to learn something. Throwing them into oh, by the way, we're going to film this too, might be a little much for some drivers. So probably smarter we didn't do that. But and then you have to do like the legal releases and all that kind of jazz too. And then we brought it back to this parking lot, and then once we were stopped, as people got out, we'd show them around the car if we didn't do that beforehand, and just kind of talk about any last minute questions they had. So pretty easy. If this is something you'd like to do, find an event in your area and volunteer. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people ask good questions. A lot of people are misinformed. So being an owner that can share a real, true experience, even if it's not always positive, giving realistic expectations to future owners is a great thing. So with that, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.